Hi guys, welcome to Robin Hood Diaries this evening. Hope you're doing well. Can't complain. Glad you're here. Glad I'm here. Again, as I say, as previewed, tonight was something about Sean falling for a best friend again, but this time it was so important we made it work. I think that's exactly what the preview said. So it's kind of, well, it is that, but I have told a story or two about falling for friends, for close friends, good friends. This was different. This was entirely different. This was not just Sean getting a hardcore crush on a guy that was a friend. It was kind of much more than that, and I'll try and kind of unravel it as briefly as I can, the mystery kind of that it was, which is a weird thing to say about a year in your life. It almost being like this, not a blur, but it was almost, and I'll explain it to you in a moment, like, did this really happen? Like, did this person really exist? Was this like a year of my life that actually happened? I don't know if you've ever felt that way. He's really the only kind of one I can think of, at least. That's why I ran to jot it down as a note for an upcoming show, because I'd never addressed Arno. His name is Arno. I don't know if he's with us or not anymore. Again, part of the mystery. Arno, A-R-N-O. There's a movie by Pasolini called Teorema, which means theorem. And it is one of my favorite films, and it is it just encapsulated, and without getting to all kind of the sexual nature of a little bit of what happened, it's not like about that, but it is Pasolini. And he comes out of nowhere, and then he comes into the life of this family, this extended family, and one by one he has these intimacies and relationships, brief, with each member of that family, and then disappears. And the family, it's a transformative experience for the family. So this is kind of how I saw Arno in hindsight, like Teorema, obviously being the lead character. So just to get through it, Arno was the son of one of the top 3 commercial television directors. Now, when I say commercials, I mean commercials, not commercial. There was her, Bob Giraldi, and maybe another, but they were like, she was like cream of the crop. French, obviously, she's French, her son, Arno, French. Relocated here probably from all kinds of amazing work in Paris. That's where they were from. That's where Arno was raised, in Paris. She came here, she lived here. She lived here with a husband that was Arno's stepdad, kinda. He was a cinematographer, whatever. So they had a place. And she enrolled him in Lycée Français, which is a French-speaking school on the west side, sort of on the west side of LA, like, and I guess like planned to live here, and it was easier to do commercials here for a while. I don't think that she planned to like live here for the rest of her life. Maybe, I don't think so. So she brought Arno, her only son, and enrolled him, and was here, for, I don't know, a few years. I don't know. See, after the Teorema experience, I don't know what happened to Arno. So we were introduced because, again, my mom was like one of the top 2 commercial television stylists working in the industry. They were very, it's not that it was cliquey, but she and like a couple others worked like, or one, I don't know, she was the gal. So they knew each other as director, commercial director, or stylist, wardrobe, or whatever. So they kind of put us together, obviously in kind of a very kind of casual way, like, my son, your son, Arno had no friends. It wasn't in a pathetic way, he just wasn't the type to have friends. He was very unusual. So I'm introduced to Arno. Arno said that he was a sort of a youthful little DJ in Paris called Carmel Arno. Probably, I don't know, did a little something there on the radio, or I don't know. Extremely cultured, fascinating, good looking, but not in a traditional sense. Unusually quite handsome. But it wasn't like somebody that I was physically attracted to, like initially, like, oh my God, look at him, that's my type, whatever. He did have one thing for against, depending on how you look at it, him, is that the front teeth were pushed in a little and he had pronounced canines. Don't ask me why. I have always gotten weak in the knees over men with slightly pushed in teeth with pronounced canines. Whatever. So he had those. So he floats into my life, and then suddenly we become inseparable. Now this is after my sophomore year. I don't talk about my sophomore year, unfortunately, because it's this fat ass chapter in my book and it swallowed up the whole year. So I kind of can't say kind of happened, what went into that year, coming out of that year, because it's all kind of in the book. For those of you getting it, it is chapter 8 is the new one that I'm talking about that got added in. Anyway, so watch out for chapter 8. That's the missing one that wasn't in the originals that everyone got. Okay, so he floats into my life. Now, we do have pot in common, you know, I mean, I've always been a bit of a pothead, but like I said, when I came out of my 14th year, recovered through 15, things started to be okay, studios. Unforgiving. Anyway, so we dovetailed, it was kind of music, like scratching was starting to first happen then, and he loved that, but his favorite band was The Residents. Now, just Google that or YouTube it. I mean, if it is music, it is weird music. But it was about art. Like, he would create art, and then I would create art, and then he would be kind of like, see, I had experience with the French. By 16, I was world traveled, and I had spent a good portion of that, believe it or not, in France, which was not my favorite country in Europe, Western Europe. So I was familiar with the French, their mindset with Americans. So that was my kind of, mindset. But then Arno floated into my life. So Arno and I are inseparable for this year following sophomore. Sophomore, my brain got scarred in this wildly bittersweet way, and I recovered kind of with Arno. He didn't know anything about my sophomore experience, but we fell into each other. We smoked a lot of weed, we talked. We didn't go like I would with other friends, like to meet at parties or to go, I wasn't clubbing by then. I was, wasn't clubbing, I wasn't 14 anymore. But it was just like, we would go, I would cut school and we would go and take pictures, or go to Hollywood, or go to a cafe, or just stuff that you kind of didn't really do with your regular friends. And it was all fluid, and it was all very spontaneous. It was a very spontaneous relationship. We were kind of partners in crime. We had a contest. It wasn't a contest. It was sort of this thing like who could roll a joint more discreetly and quickly. And he won, because we could go, there was a Japanese restaurant we used to go to, well, a couple times. And so it was always who could roll a joint without the other person knowing, or anyone else knowing. I totally forgot this, you guys, I'm sorry. So, yeah, he always beat me at that game, because we would be in a restaurant, and by the time the waitress came with the menus, he had already rolled a joint in his lap that we would, of course, enjoy after dinner. So, it was just, so So he floated into my life, then he floats like kind of by proxy, like by osmosis into my friends' lives. Mostly my girlfriend at the time, a good friend of mine, and I don't know. I mean, there's a couple of people that knew him, like, like they were very accepting of him in my life because Arno and I suddenly become like this. I mean, we were just, we were just like in tune in so many ways, and just like everything. I mean, just like in every, I'll explain the crush part, but it was like I would ask him about love. He'd tell me like, well, with the French culturally, love and just all this kind of stuff. So he floated into my life. He like we would do mushrooms at a party with my girlfriend, a couple friends, or we would float here and he would be involved in some other gathering or whatever. But it was a very kind of exclusive relationship. He went to Lycée Français. I went to Crossroads, like prestigious school in the West Side, and just every moment we had, we would either cut school or meet each other or go to the graveyard and have a joint. I drove at this point, obviously, and that was a big plus because Arno didn't drive and he didn't have his own car. I remember we got stopped once and something that we had to get thrown out the window. We were parked somewhere and it happened to be in a very kind of hustlery neighborhood, excuse me, and whatever, we got it out of the car. But again, typical of our relationship, it was just this thing. It was just this force of nature that kind of just was magnets. So, trying to wrap this up. So these feelings that I'm having that are so intense as a best friend for Arno get so deep that I realize I'm kind of falling for him. Now, it's not in a sexual way. I didn't like imagine him naked. I didn't undress him with my eyes. I didn't crave him that way. But I fell for this big time, like big time right here. But in both of them, well, it wasn't, he was straight. So then I started struggling with this feeling of like, I'm falling for my best friend, but not in a like, oh my God, like puppy love crush, I'm falling all over the place. It was this gradual thing that fell into such deep feelings that I confused it with falling for somebody. I was already in love with my girlfriend, but that was different. She was a different kind of woman. I don't mean like, in a bisexual way or anything like that, but she was a very broad-minded person. That's another show. So it got awkward, and so I finally, I didn't come out to anybody until I was 16, to my mom in a therapy session, whoop-de-doo. So I write this letter to him after a year's worth of this intensely, like partners in crime, like super glue friendship. And I write this letter for whatever the fuck reason. And I said something like, I've been with men as well as women. I'm 16, guys. And I'm trying to be eloquent about it. Like, I've been like, God knows, I've been in relationships or something. I said, with a couple of men as well as women. I was functionally bisexual, whatever. That's another show. And I gave it to him. You never put anything in writing. So he completely, of course, had no idea what to do with this. We were like these inseparable, like comrades. And then I'm telling him all this shit, and I'm kind of inferring that I'm falling for him, but it was more kind of this expository thing that kind of left it kind of way cliffhangery. So unfortunately, him in not knowing what the hell to do with any of this, shows the letter to my girlfriend. And again, luckily my girlfriend was a different kind of person and didn't take things in the ways that normal people take things. So she kind of processed it. He told me that he had showed it to her, and of course I was just completely baffled. I wasn't angry, I was just kind of like kind of like, I don't know, like octopus brain, like what? And she knows. So then it's a total cluster F, because now she knows. Now she saw it, but I know she's discreet. She won't show it to anybody. But then she mentioned it to my other friend, and my other friend's a dear friend of mine. But my other friend said something extremely horrifyingly hurtful about verifying whether the letter was written, and I had to fudge around what it said, and then something was said that was just really so inappropriate. But I forgive her for it. It was a shock. We were 16. So and then he tried to deflect, because we were still like inseparable. This wasn't going to ruin things. It was just sort of an FYI. And so he kind of tried to deflect this whole thing by saying that he had been physically intimate with one of my friends, who was also a good friend of mine. And it was the kind of thing where I wouldn't ask her if it happened, because he was telling me in confidence and whatever. So I guess he tried to kind of like throw the whole thing to the left by saying that he had been physically intimate with her, and then I not raged, but in my brain, I couldn't, like, oh my God, totally short-circuiting everywhere. And I end up telling her, and she says, Sean, nothing happened. She was in Malibu house sitting or whatever, and he came over and they smoked some pot and he left. So I got it. He didn't know what to do with it. And so as soon as as fleeting as it was that he flew into my life, he flew out. And it wasn't like abrupt. It wasn't like anything ended. There was no discussion. It just sort of faded the way it faded out the way it faded in. I have a couple of people that knew him. I have one Polaroid of him, which is we like, you squish on Polaroids. We used to do that to make them weird looking. So I can only assume this happened. I would have to ask my old girlfriend and maybe one other person that this person did happen, right? Because it was just one of those things, like no other kind of relationship that I had ever had. And it was so fiery intense, but brain intense. And I just, like I said, I misplaced that with a lot of emotional stuff that was going on for me coming fresh out of sophomore year, which only the folks that have the book are gonna know that part. Once you do, you'll understand why I keep saying I can't talk about sophomore year. Okay, I will leave you with that bizarre kind of confluence of people and then like vaporization of whatever that was, guys. Okay, anyway, thank you again for being with me tonight. It's the highlight of my day, etc., etc., etc. And take good care of yourselves until I see you tomorrow. Bye.